Howdy, it's Uncle Paul, and today I'm going to read Chapter 5 of my little self-published book, Bears Don't Eat Fat People, self-published in 2003, a long time ago. And it is in the category of creative nonfiction, meaning not absolutely everything is true. Oh, and I nearly forgot, this is the illustration that my father did for this particular chapter. Okay, Chapter 5, The Comprehension. The next week was one of physical redemption and mental deliberation. Sore muscles harassed every movement and occasionally tortured me with severe cramps. My body was lethargic and felt close to death, but my mind was racing and alive with curiosity. Placing my most comfortable chair in front of the computer, I launched another massive search on the internet. The goal was to understand the cause of obesity and its solution. I always believed that getting fat was my fault, possibly a lack of moral fortitude. However, the blame might correctly be placed on some warped gene I had not requested and over which I held no control. The days passed, the study progressed, and the cold, hard truth became evident. My body had not recovered by the next Sunday when I hobbled behind the pulpit to preach. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Part of God's great creation was humankind. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. Genesis 1:27. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? Our physical body is not in the image of God, but our mind, our conscience, and our spirit. Having been created in God's image, we have the responsibility to seek Him, to know His will for us, and in so doing we may be made righteous and holy. We will be fulfilling our purpose in life. The purpose of life on this earth is to glorify God, and we do that through our obedience to Him. A life of obedience to God may only be accomplished by humbling ourselves and dedicating our body and spirit to Him. When we become Christians, our spirit is renewed. We become new creatures and must walk in newness of life. Diligent study of God's Word and its application to our daily life will equip us for our walk in the faith. Our mind and spirit will be transformed, giving us the strength to then control what our body does. Though our physical body was not created in God's image, we are responsible for what we do with it. Our body is a shell, a tent, or a temporary temple for the Spirit, and we must use it to the glory of God. It is to be a living sacrifice in service to Him. What does it mean for our body to be a sacrifice to God? Sacrifice means to suffer loss of, to give up. Our body must not be used for our own sinful desires, but for God's purposes. Since our body is on loan from God, we must take care of it. If we don't, we eventually suffer the consequences. There are many ways we can misuse and abuse our bodies, but the one I want to discuss is obesity. Obese means excessively fat, and it is becoming a major problem in our country. In December of 2001, the United States Surgeon General released a report entitled The Surgeon General's Call to Action to Prevent and Decrease Overweight and Obesity. The report makes the claim that overweight and obesity have reached epidemic proportions. In the foreword, the report states, in 1999, an estimated 61% of U.S. adults were overweight or obese, and 13% of children and adolescents were overweight. Approximately 300,000 deaths a year in this country are currently associated with overweight and obesity. Left unabated, overweight and obesity may soon cause as much preventable disease and death as cigarette smoking. Why do so many people die from obesity? The study provides a list of what it calls health risks associated with obesity. They include premature death, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, degeneration of cartilage and bone and joints, sleep apnea, asthma, breathing problems, cancer, endometrial, colon, kidney, gallbladder, and postmenopausal breast cancer, high blood cholesterol, complications of pregnancy, menstrual irregularities, hirsutism, presence of excess body fat and facial hair, stress incontinence, urine leakage caused by weak pelvic floor muscles, increased surgical risk, psychological disorders such as depression, psychological difficulties due to social stigmatization. The problem isn't just the suffering and death of obese people, but the cost to our society as well, the health care system in particular. According to the report, the total cost of obesity for the year 2000 was $117 billion. The amount is broken up between what are called direct and indirect costs. Direct costs referring to preventative, diagnostic, and treatment services related to overweight and obesity, and indirect costs referring to the value of wages lost by people unable to work because of illness or disability, as well as the value of future earnings lost by premature death. With obesity becoming such a major problem, the next logical questions are what causes obesity and how can it be prevented? The report claims many factors are involved in the cause of obesity, but the emphasis is placed on only two. Basically, people eat too much and don't exercise enough. The prevention is obvious: eat less and become more active. The following are quotes from throughout the report. For the vast majority of individuals, overweight and obesity result from excess calorie consumption and/or inadequate physical activity. Dietary adequacy and moderation in energy consumption are both important for maintaining or achieving a healthy weight and for overall health. Many experts also believe that physical inactivity is an important part of the energy imbalance responsible for the increasing prevalence of overweight and obesity. It is also known that a healthy diet and adequate physical activity aid in maintaining a healthy weight and, among overweight or obese persons, can promote weight loss. I have reviewed many scientific studies where the goal is to discover exactly what causes someone to eat more than their body needs, and why it is so difficult to lose the unneeded weight. One's genetic makeup may be a factor, but most agree that proper diet and exercise will keep one from gaining weight or result in the loss of weight. Some say obesity is a disease. According to Webster, the word disease means a condition of the living animal or plant body or of one of its parts that impairs the performance of a vital function. Obesity may certainly lead to disease, but the only prevention is personal responsibility for what we eat and what we do. Having presented the problem, I continued by sharing what I had learned from my Bible study of gluttony and the importance of self-control. Then I addressed a question I had often asked myself: what body weight would God consider sinful? God does not provide a height-weight chart in the Bible, but I think common sense should be applied. If one's weight hinders his responsibility to God, family, and community, then he weighs too much. And if his weight threatens his longevity on this earth, he weighs too much. Great honesty is necessary to come to the correct conclusions. I completed the sermon in a way I hoped would be encouraging. Matthew 25:14-30 records the parable of the talents spoken by Christ. The principle of the parable is that each individual has a God-given potential, and it is expected to do his or her best to reach it. When we misuse and abuse our bodies, we're not trying our best to reach our potential. Since God gave each of us a potential, He has also given us the ability to reach it. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able to bear. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." Friends, this includes the temptation to overeat and be lazy. One of the most difficult things about improving ourselves is having enough patience. It is important to understand that God is patient, and so we must be patient with ourselves and with others. God created us with the ability to be faithful to Him and to make it to heaven. However, we must keep our priorities straight. We must seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. If we do so with patience and diligence, we will reach our God-given potential. We must face each day with a positive attitude, an attitude that we can overcome, an attitude that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It was time to practice what I preached. So the next day, I made a doctor's appointment. There wasn't a doctor in DuBois, so I had to travel to Riverton. The drive took more than an hour, and I grew more nervous as I considered what major ailments the doctor might discover. This was my first physical in 10 years. I felt fine, but after discovering all the diseases caused by obesity, it wouldn't surprise me if my body was being ravaged by at least 2 or 3 of them. The waiting room was crowded, but I didn't care. My mind was preoccupied with self-preservation. Before long, the nurse called my name and the inspection began. She led me to a fancy electronic scale. The secret, which had been concealed from the world for years, would finally be made public. My personal scale was rigged to only reveal if I gained or lost weight. According to it, I had lost 20 pounds in the previous 2 months. Like an auctioneer, my mind was calling, do I hear 500, 550, anyone for 600? Going. The digital numbers sped their way up as I stood perfectly still. When they stopped, the bold red numbers registered 480 pounds. Add to it the 20 pounds I lost, and I had weighed 1/4 of a ton. No, I didn't weigh a ton, but the fact that the word ton could legitimately be used in describing my size was astonishing. Without any indication of disapproval or unbelief, the nurse wrote the information on my chart. I wanted to tell her I lost 20 pounds, but didn't see the use. My blood pressure was next. I was surprised that the cup fit around my arm, and as she pumped it tight with air, I said jokingly, my pressure may be higher than my weight. Her expression remained businesslike as she slowly released the air. Pulling the cup off my arm, she stated, nothing to worry about, your pressure is normal. Yes, a little bit of redemption. I may weigh as much as a compact car, but all the news wasn't bad. After pricking my finger for a small sample of blood, the nurse guided me to an examination room. I waited for the doctor on his little stool because I couldn't fit in the chairs, which had arms. The wait wasn't long, and after we exchanged greetings, I explained to the doctor why I was on his stool. He glided into an armed chair and asked, what can we do for you today? I haven't been to a doctor in 10 years, I said, so I thought it was about time to get a physical and maybe a blood test to see if I'm diabetic. Glancing at my chart in his hand, he asked, how has your blood pressure been? The nurse said it was normal, I replied. Still looking at the chart, yes, but has it always been normal? Are you taking any medication for it? He asked. Trying not to reveal my frustration, I said, Doc, I haven't been to a doctor in 10 years. He looked at me with an expression of puzzlement, and I could tell he was slowly putting the pieces together. His expression changed to disbelief, and he asked, why? Because I haven't needed to. I guess I've needed to, but I haven't had to. He just stared at me for several seconds. Reaching over to his desk, he grabbed a blank sheet of paper and placed it on his clipboard. Okay, let's start from the beginning, he said, as he retrieved a pen from his white coat. The doctor got down to business, asking me a barrage of questions. After the grilling session, he conducted the physical. His main concern was he couldn't find my heart. It had possibly shifted or become enlarged. I didn't know what that meant, but it didn't sound good. After I got dressed, the doctor explained there was a lot of stress on my heart and kidneys, and yes, I was most likely type 2 diabetic. Once confirmed, he would prescribe a pill for my blood sugar and make me an appointment with a dietitian who would explain how to manage my diabetes. I would see the doctor in 2 weeks for a consultation concerning the results of my blood test. During those 2 weeks, I managed to lose 5 pounds. Unfortunately, it was a different nurse who weighed me before my consultation. The wait was much longer this time as I sat on the doctor's stool, thumbing through the old magazine. The doctor entered the room, sat in an armed chair, and without greeting, he said, "Well, your triglycerides are very high, more than twice what they should be." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you could have a heart attack." This truly wasn't a surprise, but hearing the words shook me. I didn't respond. The doctor said, "I could give you a pill to help keep it under control." "What must I do to bring down my triglycerides so that I won't need a pill?" Sounding rather hopeless, he said, "I don't think you will ever bring them down that much." I suddenly grew angry. He didn't even know me, so how dare he judge me that way? What I needed and expected was a positive plan of action and some encouragement to abide by it. Who was this skinny doctor to look down on me, thinking I hadn't the willpower and self-control required to... Then I realized I was sitting on his stool. Here was this 500-pound blob on his stool because I couldn't fit in anything else. Who could blame him for thinking the situation was hopeless? He must have realized he struck a nerve because he quickly added, "It would take a lot of work. I mean a lot of hard work." Right then I decided I'd had enough of being fat. I had some serious physical problems, but none of them were irreversible. The doctor was right. It would take a lot of hard work, and I was more determined than ever to do it. I was tired of the fear, tired of the pain, both physical and emotional, tired of letting down my family and friends, tired of being alone and lonely, tired of merely existing. "Doc, have you ever heard of a fat person being killed by a bear?" I asked. Looking puzzled by the question, he said, "No." "Do you know why?" I asked. Thinking I was ready with a punchline, he smiled and said, "No, why?" "Because fat people don't live life," I said. His smile turned to a frown, and I left the room. The determination I had when leaving the doctor's office only grew. I plotted a daily schedule and stuck to it doggedly. I woke at 5:30 a.m. and read in the Bible. At 6:30 a.m. I walked, gradually building up to 30 minutes. I drank a Slim Fast for breakfast and lunch, but ate a meal for supper at 5 p.m. Fruit, water, and Diet Dr. Pepper were my snacks throughout the day. After supper, I took another 30-minute walk. The evening was when food tempted me most, and my reaction was proof of my addiction. I would drive up and down the main street threatening to betray my diet at a convenience store, but talking myself out of it most of the time. Eventually, I developed a helpful strategy for the evening onslaught. I made a list of all the foods I wanted to eat and promised myself that if I still wanted them in the morning, I would go to the store and have my way. Rarely did I have to fulfill the promise. A month passed, and I'd lost another 27 pounds. My clothes were getting baggy, an event never experienced to my recollection, and which brought enormous excitement. I rummaged through my closet to see what other old clothes might once again fit. Moving was always a headache because of all the clothes I refused to part with. They were my hope chest, the hope that someday I would be able to wear them again, not concerned about current fashion. Not that they were ever fashionable. My shirts looked like they were made from bed sheets. I had reached size 8X, and to my delight, after losing nearly 50 pounds, my 6Xs were useful again. Nice clothes and how great I looked in them was the theme of numerous daydreams. Not being embarrassed to tuck in a shirt, to be able to wear a belt, to sit without shirt buttons popping off, to squat without the fear of ripping pants were just some of the highlights. The day when I could buy clothes without an X on the tag would be one of tremendous joy. Yes, I was dreaming big, so to speak. My goal wasn't just to lose enough weight to be more comfortable, but to lose enough to be considered healthy and not to attract unwanted attention. Keeping my diabetes under control wasn't as difficult as I had feared. One reason was because my diet and exercise were going so well. The meeting with the dietitian had opened my eyes to the seriousness of the disease. Without realizing it, I had been experiencing some of its symptoms for a long time. Simply put, diabetes is an excess amount of sugar in the blood, frequent urination, extreme thirst and hunger, blurred vision, drowsiness, weakness and fatigue, tingling or numbness of the feet or hands, slow healing of cuts and sores are some of the symptoms of diabetes. If the disease is not controlled, it will lead to several possible complications, such as kidney and eye disease, amputation of feet, and a stroke. All of these could be avoided if I ate the proper diet, exercised adequately, and had regular doctor's exams. I was resolved to do them all. As my weight decreased, my confidence increased. Most of my years had been lived in and therefore limited by the context of fat. My mind was now broadening, and I had a growing desire to do things I never thought possible. Bears don't eat fat people because we don't venture into the woods, and metaphorically speaking, I now wanted to explore every inch of them. I wanted to share my excitement and my dreams, but I dared not, for I had been down that road before. Too many things could still go wrong, and I didn't want to raise hopes only to have them dashed by my failure. The dreams would be my secret for now. The end of chapter 5.